Hello, I'm Mirosh, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we'll take a look at one of the most important concepts of development of any mobile application. More specifically, we will look into how we can use flavors and build configurations in KMP. In this video, we'll be coming back to our note-taking app. You can check out the full description of this app in my previous video on Kotlin serialization, and I'll drop a link to that in the description below. In this video, we'll simply add some configurations to it. Now, let's say we want to take our note-taking app into production with our Ktor client. But at the same time, we want to be able to quickly test our application locally. So how can we do that? Well, fortunately, Ktor has a solution for us, and that is something called a mock engine. Mock engine will allow us to configure a response to any of our requests, and this will make testing of our application really easy. But at the same time, we want to keep our networking code with Ktor for our production flavor. So how can we do that? Well, in Android, we have something called product flavors for that, but unfortunately, we don't have that in KMP. So we can use a third party called BuildKonfig for that. Using BuildKonfig, we'll create something similar to a flavor in Android. We'll introduce a config variable, and this variable will change depending on the configuration that we launch. Essentially, one configuration will use our mock engine, and another configuration will simply call our JSON-blob.com backend. Okay, let's get to coding. Okay, now that we are back to our KMP networking app, make sure you're on the config start branch, and the solution will be on the config solution branch. I'll leave a link to this repository in the description below. So the first thing that we need to do is declare our dependencies, and we will declare it with the rest of ours below versions, and we'll just name this one build config. And the version is going to be 0.17.1, as that's the latest one as of now. Now we'll need to declare the class path and the version of BuildKonfig, and we'll put it under the libraries. So we'll name it BuildKonfig Gradle plugin, and the module is going to be coding feline BuildKonfig BuildKonfig Gradle plugin, and the version is going to be our BuildKonfig version. So this will be a class path for the plugin, but we need to declare the actual plugin in our plugin section. For that, we'll simply copy over the line that we just wrote, and we'll remove certain parts. Okay, now let's resolve that in our build Gradle file. Above our plugins, we will need to declare this build script that we have right here. So let's copy that over. Okay, nice. We don't need this because we already have the Kotlin Gradle plugin by default. Here we will resolve the class path that we have defined just previously. Okay, let's sync this to make sure that it actually resolves. Oh, and I made a mistake here, so I'll just fix this to ID. Okay, the class path has resolved. Now let's actually declare the plugin. And we'll need to sync this as well. Oops, another mistake. Okay, let's sync. Okay, now BuildKonfig actually wants us to provide a default config for our build, which makes sense. So let's declare it below all of our code here. BuildKonfig, and below we'll put the package name. This won't resolve until we actually specify everything that we need. and we will put the default config. We don't really need to put anything here, so I think this will actually do just fine. Let's try to sync this. Okay, we have our build config set up, but right now it's not actually doing anything. So we need to specify what we wanted from the beginning, which is we wanted to differentiate between the two builds when one will be using the mock server or our mock engine, and the other build will be using the actual production JSON-blob.com. And to do that, we need to actually declare another default config, but this one will pass in the dev string, which will actually work as a flavor. As I mentioned previously, we don't really have a way to declare flavors here as easily as in Android. So this is sort of similar to the flavors that we have in Android. And I'll show you later how we can switch between these two builds. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to actually build a Boolean useMockServer variable that will change between our builds. Let's declare that. For our production, we of course don't want to use the mock server, so we'll make sure it's false. And then for our dev environments, we want to make this true. And here we need to resolve this. The problem here is that we actually need to import these types manually because it's a little bit tricky, and if you try to resolve them automatically, you can run into some trouble. So I'm simply going to be copying and pasting the actual import for this Boolean type. So for that, I'll just go to the top and simply import what I need. And now it's resolved. Now we should have everything ready to have different builds. And let's sing this. Now let's build our app, and we'll see that this plugin generates a file where our config variables will be stored. We can simply run our app. Okay, after we have run our app, it has been built, and the default name of this file with all the config variables, I think, is the BuildKonfig file. Yes. So it has generated this file, and as you can see, we have the useMockServer as false, and that's correct because we have not yet specified that we want a different flavor or a different build. And if we wanted to do that, then we would need to declare that in our Gradle properties. So let's go over there and declare that. In our Gradle properties, at the bottom, we'll put BuildKonfig flavor, and we'll give this the name of the flavor we've declared. So in our case, it's the dev. Now let's sync this. Okay, so this says basically I want a dev flavor as of now. So let's see if the correct file is generated. Okay, our app has built, so the file should have changed. Let's take a look. And indeed, we see that it has changed. So now we can reference this variable throughout our app to use the mock server. Okay, now let's see our useMockServer variable in action. Let's go over to our network helper class. And here below, I've declared the mock client that we'll use to mock our requests. I'm not going to go into explaining what exactly it does because that's beyond this lesson, but I will do a high-level overview here just to give you an idea of what this does. Is here we are also intercepting our requests. We can filter it by methods, and here I am making this mock engine return something that we need for the get method, and for everything else we have some other logic that we want executed. And that's just a high-level overview for you to understand what we're doing here. Now let's use our useMockServer variable. We want to keep all of this configuration for both of our mocking code and actual networking code. So what we'll do is we'll introduce an if statement here. If BuildKonfig useMockServer, then we will use our mock client. And if not, then we'll use our create platform HTTP. Now, for this to work correctly, we need to wrap this in the brackets because we want the config to apply to our mock client as well. And let's clean this up a bit. And this should basically work. Now let's test this out. First, let's use our regular HTTP client. For this, we'll need to go back to our Gradle properties and remove the flavor. I'll just comment it out for now and sync this. Now let's run our app. Okay, now that our app has launched, let's test it. Foo bar Android, and we should see our request going to the server. So let's see that. And indeed, we see it going to api.jsonblob.com. Now let's check and verify that we're actually getting the response. So yes, we're getting the response with the created blob URL. Awesome. Now let's test our mock server. For that, we'll uncomment our BuildKonfig flavor here and sync it. Okay, now let's launch this and test. Okay, let's enter hello, myself, bar, send. And how do we know that we're sending to our local mock server is because I'm creating the IDs sequentially here. So it's going to be ID 1 and then ID 2. And that's not something that we will be getting from the actual JSON blob API. And that's how BuildKonfig works. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.